I wanted to welcome you all, first of all, to the breakout session. We've got two really talented librarians here from the University of Rhode Island, you might have guessed from the title, here to share their one-shot information literacy strategy of using 6 interactive modules. Have I got that correct?
Something like that.
Okay. You might want to know that prior to his music, art, and literature librarianship, our presenter, Jim Kinnie, worked in television production. And in his spare time, he's a banjo player. And Jim's info...
I didn't write all that stuff down, did I?
Sure. Katie Leahy is also known as a celebrity because she was a star soccer player in high school. Yes? Community college? No?
Talk about digital.
No?
There's 2 of us.
Well, okay. Just
But I did play soccer for a really long time, so.
You did, good, because I brought along, since both things involve a good setup for your
Yep,
program.
okay.
And that's what you do with, I think, with your InfoRhode program. You do the setup.
That's right.
And I want everybody, as you're watching, see, I was setting up my soccer, this is why I'm soccer, I'm doing a soccer display case for the Women's World Cup, which is next week. So when you hear that on the news, remember, take your setup that you get today and practice to get to your goals. So, thanks very much.
Thank you.
And I'll be looking forward to hearing this.
All right. Well, thanks. I don't know what to say here. Well, just to clarify, my name's Jim. This is Katie, in case there is any confusion here. So here we are. We're going to, I'm going just to set up the session here, as you know, we want to do. I'm going to give you an overview about what we mean by InfoRhode. You know, maybe some of you have seen it. If you are sitting there with a tablet or a laptop, you can go to the short link here if you want to follow along or play with it while we're talking. That's okay. There is a mute button on there, so. And then again, I'll talk about the construction of especially the interactive parts of the tutorials. We did some usability testing, and Katie really took charge of that. When before we actually released it to the community, we tested it with some real students, and then we were aiming toward piloting actually using the tutorials in some of our instruction sessions. So we have a really good relationship with the writing and rhetoric department, so we work with them to pilot the tutorials in a flipped classroom kind of model. And then seeing what's going to happen next, which, you know, we'll get to. And please interrupt me anytime, you know, just jump up or yell out if I'm not being clear or if we're not being clear and you want some clarification. So we got a grant a couple of years ago from the Provost's office to create some information literacy videos or tutorials. They ended up being a series of videos, 13 of them, produced by again, a grant. They offered us a grant. We bought computer. We released some time, but we were able to work on this for a year. My colleagues Mary McDonald and Amanda Eisenstark. Mary's the keynote later today, so you'll have a chance to talk to her in person if you're interested. We kind of divided up the work. Mary kind of ushered us through as sort of the executive producer. We all worked on the script, the scripting for all of these modules. Amanda actually put the first videos together. She did the narration and the first version of this, again, there were 13 kind of short videos. They were PowerPoints, really. A lot of bulleted lists and the narration, and not very exciting, as you can kind of see visually there. So we knew there was more to this, and they're okay, and you can put them in point of need, embed them in our LMS, and use them appropriately when you need to. But we wanted to add some more active learning and interactive stuff to it, so I wrote up a sabbatical proposal, and that's what it took me all last spring to do, was to rebuild these or build stuff around those videos. So the tutorials themselves, it is kind of, I don't want to say comprehensive because everyone does the research differently, and this is one way that we explain to our students, but you know, it's the basics, and it's starting broad and narrowing and using and evaluating the information. So we had hoped to focus our main, you know, audience would be our undergraduates, and especially those in general education courses. We have a new program, new Gen Ed program we're in the middle of implementing at the moment, and that's a whole other story, but information literacy is one of the student learning outcomes that will be assessed, and faculty will have to, you know, will be able to choose that as one of their outcomes for the course. So it's important, and it's really kind of built in structurally into the university curriculum. We also have sort of a dual enrollment program with the writing courses, the 100 level courses where high school seniors will take the course for course credit. We do a whole big program with the writing department, and we try to get some of those high school students on campus when they can. It's really their problem logistically to get buses down, you know. In Rhode Island, you know, driving more than 20 minutes or a half hour, you know, from one end of the state to the other is a real problem. We're in the southern part of the state, and, you know, most of the urban areas are where the high schools, you know, are. But the again, we try to get them in there so they will get the same instruction that our undergraduates would get, because they all come to us for instruction. And of course, subject classes. And since they are online modules, it would be, you know, ideal to embed them in courses. And we wanted to address a lot of different learning styles, make it active, so students can actually, you know, get their hands on some of the tools and work with them themselves. So they get some experience with it, and if they interact with it, you know, it's more of a valuable experience for them. They will be able to, you know, when they actually do it for real, they'll remember that and hopefully, you know, remember what they did. And we know that students like it sort of non-linear, so they can navigate themselves, jump around. You don't have to start at the beginning and go forward. You can jump in the middle of any of these, depending on, you know, your need, you know, what you want to find out. So. The rationale for all of this, you know, I did the sabbatical, so of course I felt obligated. I had to read up on some stuff, you know, actually sort of do some research on this. And the main rationale I found was actually a very recent study at the time, the Learning the Ropes, how freshmen conduct course research. Once they enter college, this is a project information literacy report that came out in 2013, the end of 2013. And in this report, a couple of the main findings were that incoming freshmen find that the Google strategies they used in high school, you know, just don't bring them the stuff that their professors want or that they need for their college level courses. So, and the second kind of point that I pulled out of this project was a project information literacy report, was that they're unfamiliar with the academic library's resources. You know, they just, when they come to college and they have to do research, they just fall back on what they know, which is Googling, and it worked for them probably, you know, through high school. And, you know, based on what we just heard there, you know, that could probably use some improvement as well. But when they come to college, there are so many more resources, it's really overwhelming for the students to, you know, where do they go from here? You know, what do I do? What do I use? So, obviously the library is there to help them do that, and we do a lot of that with one-shots, and now we're trying to build up, you know, just spread our, you know, the audience around, or reach more of an audience. So again, I kind of read through some studies, and we have a bibliography at that link. I should just mention it's a LibGuide or LibGuide with the bibliography on there, so a lot of these studies will be listed there. This age group, meaning, you know, college freshmen or first-year students, high school students, they prefer experiential and interactive learning with practical applications. So if they know they're going to use this for an assignment, you know, it's worth it to them to learn it. And again, non-linear was the big word about 25, 30 years ago when CD-ROMs came out. You know, you could jump around and, you know, go in where you need to go. You don't have to start at the beginning and follow through. So, you know, random access was important, and especially, you know, online tutorials are designed for that. Especially, you know, the ones that you can embed at a point of need or link where, short videos or short tutorials, link them where they need them in their assignments or in the LMS or wherever. So. And as far as the tutorials themselves, it kind of reflects what the students like. Interactive elements or active learning elements where the students get their hands on the tools and work with them in practice. The videos have to be short. I know you've probably run into professors who like to put their hour-long lectures online and call it, online learning, so that's not what we're doing here. They need to be short enough so it fits in with anyone's attention span, not just students, but and they're short and to the point. You don't cover a whole lot of objectives in these videos. So, and again, interactive elements. There are many definitions, and for me, I put in a lot of different types, but they could be as simple as clicking on a link. It's interactive. You see it. They actually move their mouse and click on it. But also, we have some other things where you fill in the text boxes, and you can use that information in other ways. You'll see how this works, I guess. And of course, good use of graphics. And more kind of what's the word? Characteristics. I found this dual coding theory where a voice will narrate more or less what the text reads. I was just talking to someone yesterday at another conference where they were saying that the narration shouldn't be exactly the same words as the text on the screen, as it paraphrases or plays with it. So I did that a little bit, but mostly it is somebody's voice reading. It's Amanda's voice reading the text that's on the screen. So I guess it just helps memory if you're getting two sensual inputs for the same information. So. Step-by-step examples and self-navigation, I guess there's a theme there. So just in terms of production, it took, people say sabbatical, you go traveling, you go goof off for a year. Well, mine was a 6-month sabbatical, but I did actually work at home, and it took a good 6 months to do this. So if anyone's anticipating, making your own tutorial, plan out a good chunk of time here. In addition to looking up all that stuff and studying and kind of reading, I also had to kind of organize those 13 videos into some package and to create it with a web authoring tool. And for several reasons, I chose Adobe Captivate, mainly because they had a good deal on an educational version, money-wise, that the university was paying for. But also, it's very familiar. It's kind of like PowerPoint, on steroids. You can do a lot with PowerPoint, but this includes a lot of widgets and all the interactive stuff. I had to kind of, make consistent font styles, the background, layout, the branding, of course, with URI branding colors. And Katie came pretty close to our dark blue. There's a blue and gold kind of, but they're very specific, as you know, colors in the color wheel there. So again, it was Adobe Captivate. It worked with that, but there were some problems. Captivate works on SWIFT files or Flash, players. So I tried to make this as broad as I could. I think I was, optimistically thinking everyone's going to use their tablet or their iPad. And of course, iPad doesn't use Flash, but Captivate will publish in HTML5, which iPad will use. However, it kind of restricted a lot of things. There are no rollover, you can't roll over your mouse and click on something, and the table of contents that was built into Captivate didn't work really well with an iPad. And there were a bunch of other things that Flash does really well and iPad doesn't. So, but in an afterthought, we're doing we're actually doing a formal space study in the library, and anecdotally, I'm sure the space study will find, and anecdotally we find that students use laptops pretty much exclusively in the library. I mean, you always see them at the desktops around, but when they're sitting in groups, every one of them has a laptop up. So, maybe, I should give up on the iPad idea, I suppose. So one of the things that took me a long time was organizing the whole tutorial. Now, it is the basics of college-level research, and it sounds kind of too comprehensive. You do want to make it short and to the point. So there are a whole lot of short and to the points built into this module. And it follows the research process where you kind of come up with an idea, you work with narrowing it or broadening it, and then start background research, do focus with articles, evaluate as you go along, and of course citing. So with the 13 videos, well, actually 2 of them were really for our catalog. We have kind of 2 flavors of our catalog, and but I was able to kind of crunch those into one, and the 6 modules each will have 2 of the videos of the 13, and one of them has 3. That's in the Gather 2, which is finding articles. So the modules, again, I kind of hung things around those videos. So each module would have the video presentation, followed by an interactive activity, followed by a quiz. And then the next section of the module would be the next video, the related video, an activity, and a quiz. So there is some sort of linear, I hate to say structure, but or organized structure, I suppose. One way to organize it, this is not the only way. I'm sure that if you are thinking of doing something like this, you may already have information that you want to build around, or tutorials or something, or start from scratch, great. But just so you'll know, these are the titles. I don't know if you can see them very well from there, but these are the video titles, the 13 videos. So one is basically an overview, the basics, college level research, and why can't I just search Google? Okay, so we have, why can't, we have some ideas about that. This is the kind of organizing. We develop a search strategy. We have a build your own concept map activity in there. This is the book section. And one thing we'll get to what's next, but we're changing our catalog in a couple of weeks. So this whole thing will be totally revised. I'm not sure when, but it'll get there. The 3 videos here in Gather were just basic finding articles, a generic thing. How do you choose databases if you're doing different topics? How do you choose them at URI? And searching databases. There's some redundancy here, but I know that repetition increases learning. So the more you do this stuff or hear it in different ways, that helps. Evaluating information, we use the CRAP test. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the CRAP test. Scholarly versus popular. That's one of the things the writing department was really interested in, having students identify the formats of different the resources they get, the sources they get. Why cite and how do I cite? So that's pretty obvious. So those are the videos that we built around. We already kind of had these objectives. I probably had to rewrite a bunch of them just so it's all organized on one page. The approximate times are there, so nobody's, you'd think I'm going to finish this 5 seconds before class or 5 minutes before class. It's not going to happen because this one takes 25, but most of them are around 20, some 15. And again, those videos are 2-3 minutes, something like that. Any questions so far? I hope to have some time to actually demonstrate this, so maybe I should rush through a little. We can get to some of this later. So Katie actually took over. We wanted to see what real students would, how they would work with this. So Katie organized our usability testing.
Yep. So while
oh wait. Here, take this.
Oh. Cool. I'll take this. So while Jim actually was on sabbatical, I was his sabbatical replacement, and every so often he would send bits and pieces of the new tutorials as they came out. So before we did the usability testing, it pretty much in a vacuum. It was Jim working with these tutorials and the department getting to see bits and pieces as they came along. So part of the reason we did the usability testing was to find out, okay, we need to find out how these work on a larger scale and to kind of see how students would work with them, because they're the ones that these are meant for. So again, with any tool, they need to be tested, make sure any glitches, technological errors, things like that can be found and addressed before they were released to a wider community. So our objectives in this were to specifically look at the technological functionality, make sure that these things could work as they went, look at the clarity of the language so students could understand what was meant to be done when, so they could self-guide themselves through these tutorials without maybe a librarian sitting there next to them helping them. And also the ease of navigation, where students able to figure out what they needed to do as they go through these tutorials. So again, we wanted to find the areas that needed to be improved upon, and also we wanted to get students in to use these to get feedback from them, because they're the ones these are meant for, and we wanted to see how they interacted with them to make sure they were kind of engaging, or see how they would use them to maybe guide them in different ways if we needed to. So one of the things before we started the usability testing, which took place in October of 2014, October, November, kind of in the flip over mid-semester, we have a library school on campus, and we have library school students who work with us in the reference department. So we had them kind of go through it too, just to get a little bit of their perspective, have them go through and just be a second set of eyes, because it would be a fresh pair of eyes rather than those of us who had seen them before, or Jim who had been working with them for a while. So that way they could give us some feedback, and they were able to find maybe some things in the transcripts for the closed captioning and things like that that we might not have noticed initially. So for the development of the testing, basically we needed to figure out how do we make this work with our budget and the amount of time that we had going on, because we wanted to try and get these out by the spring semester. So of course, like a librarian does, we went and did a literature review, took some research from a lot of different areas to see what different libraries had done with their tools, and also just usability testing in general. This is a tool that we're testing, and we wanted to see how it works. We relied a lot on Steve Krug's usability testing methods. On the slip I passed out to everyone earlier. If you didn't get one, I have more over here. We have a list of our resources that you can consult, not only with the usability testing, but also Jim's research in developing the tutorials. But he has a great website, and he has 2 books that offered a lot of great information on how to pretty much do usability testing yourself. And we found the best way in much of the literature was to have the user, whoever's doing the testing, verbally explain what they're doing as they're doing the tool, and set out some tasks for them to accomplish. And we also found you don't need many participants. It depends on the scope of your study and what you want to do. Because again, depending on what you're doing, you may be able to do usability testing again, which may be something we're considering, especially as we're going to have to revise some of this with our new catalog. So for our resources and tools, we had to see what we looked at. We had library classroom availability with computers for these students to use. And we wanted to find a tool that would help us with the actual usability testing. We wanted to get a recording of the students going through the test, but we didn't necessarily want their faces or anything. So we actually, through the university, have a WebEx subscription, which is a video conferencing software. So we're able to set that up so it could not only be used in the room, but also screencast. So the facilitator during these sessions, we had 18 sessions, so we could test each module 3 times. I was the facilitator in the session, so I would be in the room with the student, kind of helping them along. While Jim was able to watch in a different room, so the student didn't have a bunch of librarians just over their shoulder watching what they did, and probably freaking them out and making them uncomfortable. But some of our colleagues were able to kind of drop in as well that were interested. The others in the department, some of the people who teach and use the old tutorials, were able to drop in and kind of see how the students were using them that way. So we used WebEx so we could record their screen movements, we could see where they were clicking when, and it also let us record their audio as they talk, so we were able to hear their thoughts and things like that, so that way when we went back and looked at the results from these, we could watch the video without having to rely on hastily scribbled notes as this was going on. So before we did any of this, number one, we got IRB approval from our institution, because even though we're testing the tool, we were incorporating students in this. It wasn't exempt review, but just to be safe, we wanted to cover all our bases. So we knew our audience was going to be undergraduate students, and as a plus side, as Jim said, the library has had a long relationship with the writing department, so we were able to reach out to some of the instructors we knew over there who were able to start helping us recruit students. They could let some of their students know, saying, hey, the library is doing this thing. If any of you guys are interested, get in touch. And we also teach credit courses, and we were able to recruit some of our students and students in the library as well. So with the 6 modules, how things kind of happened, we recruited 18 students to each complete 1 module. We had scheduled about an hour for each session, but again, as you saw in the timings, they averaged at most about 25 minutes. So some of the other time was taken going through the process of getting the student in the room, explaining what was happening that day, and as we were using video recording software, we did have to gain their permission and consent. We had to have them sign consent forms saying, yes, it's cool that you guys are recording me, as we were just using those in the library only. And so a lot of our communication with the students took place over email over a couple weeks. We got these scheduled ahead of time. The one thing though is we didn't have as high of a response rate that we necessarily would have liked to have more backup students, but it was kind of an awkward time of the month. As we said, it was late October, early November when we did this, so it was right around midterms. And as we were using the classrooms and things like that, most of the testing took place in the day, which might not have worked well with the student schedules. So there was that as well. So on the day and time of the test, the student would come in. I would usually meet them in the library. I would have the classroom set up ahead of time. The computer would already be started with the WebEx meeting, so they didn't have to watch me do all that stuff and get everything set up. And our kind of navigation page for the main tutorials would already be up on the screen. So they would come in, we would go through the consent process, and then I would start the recording on WebEx. And their task essentially was, if one of your professors assigned this tutorial, please take it as if you were doing it for homework, and they would pretty much go as they went. And part of my presence in the room was to encourage them to think out loud as they went. So they could say, oh, I really like this, or I'm trying to click here and it's not going, or, oh wow, that was really cool. We got that a couple times, especially with the activities and things like that. So it was really great that both Jim and I were able to watch the student take these tutorials at the same time and take notes, because we were able to pick up on some things that were happening that the student might not have noticed, but we would notice as people who knew the tutorials well. And as Jim was in the other room, we did have a phone in the room, so that way once it was complete, Jim or I were able to call to the other room, and then if they had any additional questions, we could ask the student then. Maybe, do you think this works? Do you have any thoughts? Some students actually sometimes made some suggestions like, oh, it'd be really cool if you incorporated this. It tended to be the students who had been either frequent users of the library or ones that had been in our library classes would be like, oh, one of my professors talked about this in one of my classes. It'd be cool if you added that in there too. So it was really great to see. So once the tutorial was complete, the student was able to ask questions then, because we didn't really want to lead them in any way. We wanted them to just pretend that I wasn't in the room with them, just to go through it as if they were in their dorm doing it. So once the session was complete, we had to get some incentives to get them in there. So our dean was gracious enough to allow a budget of us, so we were able to give them a $10 gift card for their time. So it was a pretty good thing. In terms of privacy concerns, the participants aren't identified on any of the materials that we collected. None of the stuff in the recordings or anything matches to the student. We had everything labeled in terms of like Module 1, Session A, something like that. There's only video. The video recordings only have the audio, so there's nothing of the actual student in those. So if we wanted to show them at, say, faculty meetings or something like that, it wouldn't be breaching the student's confidentiality. The only thing is they did have to sign a consent form for the recording. So in terms of the results, we were able to complete 15 sessions. 3 of the 6 modules were tested 3 times, and those tended to be the most heavily interactive portions, which were Identify, Gather 1, and Gather 2, which is book searching and article searching. And 3 of the 6 sessions were tested 2 times. We had a couple no-shows, and there wasn't much we could do about that. But we were under the impression that we're going to be doing further usability testing in the future. But we were able to find some slight typographical issues, some widget compatibility issues. They don't always work all the time, especially if they're from an outside vendor trying to work with Captivate and that software. And we found that students wanted like bigger arrows and clearer buttons for navigation in more prominent places so that they can more easily find them. And they wanted more audio narration and direction for the embedded activities and things like that. So more introduction and things like that to understand kind of what they were supposed to do in certain sections. So it tended to work out really well. And again, we had a couple suggest things to add in, like, oh, it'd be really great if you talked a little bit more about call numbers in this way, or included a chart for this. And it was like, okay, we'll take that into consideration. In terms of the limitations, it was a small scale, especially with the no-shows participants, and it wasn't in a controlled environment. We used our library classroom computers, which are PCs, so we weren't able to test on Mac operating systems. And we tended to use the same browser, which is Firefox, which is the recommended browser for our learning management system, Sakai, because the tutorials are kind of platformed on the Sakai management system. That's where they're hosted, so that way students can access it that way. But in the future, if we do more testing, we will vary the different devices and browsers and things like that to kind of cover all the bases. Any questions so far? Yeah? Okay, so now let's talk about the pilot. So we wanted to kind of flip the classroom a little bit, like Jim talked about earlier in the session today. We have a great relationship with the writing department for a number of years, especially with the introductory writing courses, which are Writing 104 and 106, the lowest kind of level, and it is a giant gen ed program. It's one of the biggest gen ed courses on campus, so it's a great kind of access point for us to get involved with the students at the undergraduate level and get information literacy instruction kind of going. So as we've worked with them for a number of years, Jim actually approached them and wanted to see if they were interested in a pilot project where we could use these tutorials with their classes and kind of help with the instruction portion. So what we did was, with the writing department, we kind of singled out 7 sections of introductory writing courses to pilot a flipped classroom model. Where they would view the videos ahead of time and then come to class for more guided searching. So this is actually one of our instruction classrooms, and this is also where some of our usability testing took place. Just as you can see, it's regular PCs, things like that, quiet room, where things took place. So for the flipped classroom model to work, the preparation side, or what the students had to do before they came in, they were to complete 3 of the InfoRhode tutorials. They were to complete START, which is pretty much what we view as the introduction module to the research process. There is Identify, which is talking about research questions, and brainstorming your topic. That's where there's the interactive concept mapping tool. And then Gather 2, which is talking about finding articles and using databases to find periodical articles and evaluating them, because that is normally what we do focus on in the writing sessions. The objectives for that class are, for writing, is introducing students to periodical databases and how to access those articles once they find them in the databases through the URI libraries. And then the second part is how to evaluate those articles to know whether or not they're scholarly or popular, which is covered in the Gather 2 module. So in the classroom, students, I believe I did 4 of these. Pretty much this is the rough outline of the lesson plan that we did. Students were asked to kind of recall what they were asked to do in the tutorials. Some of the instructors were really great, and they actually asked, because there's quizzes embedded in these tutorials, was to have them take screenshots and send it to the instructor proving that they did take the quiz. So they had incentives and to make sure that the students did that. I can't say that for all the instructors, but I know a few of them did. So in the classroom, students were asked to recall what they learned in the module, in the tutorials. I would specifically ask them, what were some things that you learned that you think would be especially helpful to remember as you're searching today in class, or as reminders for your fellow students? So I'd give them a couple minutes to talk about it, and then I'd write some of their ideas on the board and maybe address some of them. And I would ask if they had any questions on things that they saw in there. So then, as kind of our tentative steps to embracing the new threshold concepts and incorporating them into our normal lesson plans that were based on the standards, we did a brief discussion of the threshold concepts and talking about some of the things related to how authority is contextual, talking about how to look at the authors, what their experiences are as they're looking at these articles, looking at research as inquiry, having their questions and things like that, and also looking at scholarship as a conversation. So we would talk about that a little bit, and we would show them some of the specific data, subject-specific databases that we had available. In our normal writing sessions, we would focus on Academic Search Complete, which was our general database, because a lot of times with these writing classes, students have topics all over the place, so it's hard to pin them down. But in these sessions, just because we were spending less time demonstrating, we could say, here are some of our other databases that we have available that you might like to try. And then for the majority of the class time when students were in the library, they were given time to search. And then towards the end of class, we would kind of bring them back together, show them some of the resources again, and wrap up on a focus on the evaluation of the sources, incorporating the CRAP test and reviewing some of the concepts as well. So basically how it differs from our current model, there's fewer search demonstrations. Instead of getting up in front of the classroom, showing them how to search a database, what some of the features are, how to tell whether an article is popular or scholarly, kind of getting clues from the records and things like that. They had already gotten that in the modules ahead of time, so we didn't have to really go over that in depth again, which was great. It gave students more time to actually do the searching, because sometimes, depending on the length of class time, our classes range from 50 minutes to 75, I believe. So the classes would have varied times with the amount of time they could search, just depending. So the students did have more time dedicated to searching, and as librarians, we had more time to work one-on-one with the students. While they were searching, we were able to go around the room, talk to them a little bit, ask them what their topic was, maybe offer them some suggestions, so if they had trouble. And not only for us, the faculty member was also able to walk around and help them with their writing assignments, because most of these classes were scheduled in kind of conjunction with writing assignments that were coming up, because these classes are to support the coursework where they have to do research for an assignment. So it really worked well for both us and the instructor, where we were able to spend more time with the students working. So I'm going to pass this back over to Jim, and he's going to talk a little bit about what we found.
Okay, as Katie mentioned, we've had a relationship with the Department of Writing and Rhetoric, I guess, so that for the last 5 years or so, we've been assessing their one-shots with a Survey Monkey. We don't call it a survey, we call it an evaluation. They're asked to paste in the title of an article they found, paste in their search terms they use, their research question, and we asked them to decide whether this article is scholarly or not. Okay, so those are what we asked them to input, in addition to, was it a good presentation, did you learn anything, and the real kind of evaluation. But these two outcomes, if anyone, maybe many of you, some of you have been to Immersion, the assessment track, that's where I went in 2009, so 2010 I wrote up this big assessment plan for the writing program, and these were the two outcomes that we wanted to measure. That they would refine their search, and as you probably all know, finding verbs for these objectives is really, it took me a while to come up with that, with the help of the instructors there. Refine their search so that they can identify citations to appropriate articles for their research assignment. So that's kind of the big one. Did their search actually get the results that they should have expected? And outcome two, again, would they be able to identify that article as scholarly or popular? So in this past semester in the spring, with the flip model, since we only do the surveys on Tuesdays and Thursdays, those are our 75-minute classes, so we have enough time at the end to do that. we only were able to do about 3 of the out of the 7 flipped classrooms. So these numbers are not scientific, they're not, they're not really usable in any real way, but it gives us an indication of where we might want to focus or change things around. So, again, those are the questions. These are the objectives turned into the question for us to evaluate. And this is a quick and dirty Excel chart. We found that on question 1, the flipped classroom actually did a little bit better. You'll see the red line here. So let me read these numbers here, not that they're much different, but question 1, the article matches the search. It was actually 90% for the flipped classroom and 73.6 for the traditional, I called it here. And I attribute that to opening up to the other databases, because you're in a subject database, you're going to get much more focused articles. So again, that's anecdotal. It's not, I haven't, what's the word, controlled for, whatever. No standard deviations here. So, and number 2, they did slightly worse, not as good. So 78.6 for the flipped classroom, but 83.3 for the traditional. And for what I usually do is, or what we usually do, because I enlist a lot of those library grad students to do this evaluation, but what we usually do is just, do an overall number. How many of the whole class do we do? So what I measured again was just doing, say, if this were all just one big session without the class, just to compare it to the overall numbers. So they're kind of in between. You can see the green there. I just should have written those numbers down, but it's kind of normal. And it kind of compares with, this is what my report from 2013, I guess. 2014 still in the works. I rushed through this past spring semester for this presentation, but you'll see that the flipped classroom was 90% on question 1. In spring of 2013, it was 89, so it's close to that. But you can see they kind of fluctuate, and I can't account for that. I'm sure if I get some researcher to actually work with these numbers, there may be some explanation for that. And they did slightly better on question 2. I'm looking at spring of 2013, so the flipped classroom was a little bit higher than the overall number, say, for that. And you can see those are all in the low 80s or high 70s for that as well. So. It's just going to take some. We may need to focus if we do. We're probably going to do more flipped classrooms. Whether we move the whole system over, that's still unclear. We still have to talk about that. But if we do, we may want to concentrate. Even with the traditionals, we may want to concentrate more on, scholarly and non. But that translates into, you hear a lot of these days about students not recognizing the formats. Understanding the difference between a book chapter and a scholarly article, a popular magazine, a newspaper. I saw a presentation where somebody showed a list of Google results, and she said a librarian would see there's a book chapter, there's an article, there's a newspaper, there's a links, and an undergrad would see that same list and say website, 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 website. So that may be a place where we need to concentrate. And the other thing is the new threshold concepts. We're also kind of working with a way to work those in without being really explicit about it. And we're hearing more and more things at conferences about actually making, say, authority is contextual, putting that into a context, into a lesson or something in class that will explain that without actually saying it, where the students get it, but they don't know they're getting it, They don't know they call it, authority is contextual. So we're working on that too. So let me get myself untangled here. So what's next? I think I start on this, right? So as Katie mentioned, or maybe I did, June 15th, we're going with Ex Libris, Primo as the public services, the public face of Ex Libris. We've been working with Innovative, and so not only do I have to update all of the, the book gathering stuff, but there are screenshots kind of, placed throughout all the modules, say the homepage is going to change. So there are several homepage screenshots showing the Helen catalog, which is our consortium, Helen Consortium, which we're leaving and going to another catalog. So those need some changes. There's talk of going to something other than Academic Search Complete. We may go down to Academic Search Premier. I say down, but we find that they have very similar results, so it's not a big deal to us. Except that it's like major maintenance for me. I'm hoping that I can just chop out the word complete out of the narration. So she just says, oh, we're searching academic search, which is kind of a general term. People use that anyway. So, and the big thing, what I've been trying to do for the last year or so, working with IT or talking to IT, is to report the scores in Captivate to Sakai, which is our learning management system. Right now they don't talk to each other. Our IT department says that the SCORM player, for all of you techies, it's an acronym, SCORM. I'm not sure what it does, but I know that it talks to, Captivate talks to the LMS. There's also an API, Tin Can API, which will do the same thing. We're going over to an outside vendor to support Sakai, so we're hoping that they have this built in, and that should happen. I'm not sure when, but probably within the next few months, we hope to have that working so that students don't have to take screenshots to prove that they took the the assessment. They can actually report it into their Sakai gradebook. Adobe Captivate works with Blackboard, it works with Moodle, and it may work with others right at the moment, but again, we're a Sakai campus, so we're trying to make that work, which again will really improve that assessment part, and it also helped the flipped classroom so that instructors will actually be able to assign grade or points to that. So it's worth it for students to actually take it before they come to the session. And of course, outreach, various departments, we're just trying to get through this pilot program and other distractions like the new general education program. So but since it is new and the information literacy is a student learning outcome, and all the, or not all the courses, but courses have to choose 2 student outcomes, so we're going to plan on having a big push toward not only, what information literacy is and how you can rearrange your course, or you're probably already doing it in your course now, and you just call it something different, but let's us help you make this a student learning outcome. So again, it's more outreach not only for that, but these modules will support that as well, and we hope people take us up on that. So I guess we're running a little, more or less on time. We have about 10 minutes for questions. So, or I can actually show some of the tutorial. I can do that while we're answering questions, maybe. Any questions while we're? Yes.
At present, you're piloting the program as you have?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
At present, you're piloting your program through the pilot stage?
Yes, we just finished the spring semester.
When you mentioned the flipped classroom, are you sending it out to, how are the students or the pilot programmees getting it? Are you taking it out the classroom? Are they logging into the web page? Are they?
Yeah. Well, right now we worked with the writing department, so we talked to them, and that's part of our outreach too, it's on our homepage, it's there, but we really haven't gone out and say, hey, we have this new tool for you, and that's kind of what's next. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, the question I was having is that I was wondering, how do the students access those? Is there a link on the homepage?
Yep.
And eventually, is there, we're looking at creating our own, information to it as well, but we use Blackboard, and the problem we've had with it is compatibility, and just you're talking to each other, like you mentioned earlier. We're just wondering have you gotten it yet, or would be the next step?
Yeah, again, it's one of our next steps, and it should work well. It depends on the software. Captivate works well with Blackboard. There are others. Articulate is another one. Articulate storyline, or I think that's a lot more expensive, but it's a really powerful tool. Yeah, integrating, and these, the modules just have links, and so that link can go anywhere, really. And so you could, again, part of our outreach, maybe, with listservs and maybe flyers or that kind of thing, we can explain what some of the ways faculty can use this. And since it is just a link, that's, common knowledge, how to use a link, So, does that answer your question?
It's right on our library website. We have a whole InfoRhode tutorial section under help that's publicly accessible. Anyone can go in and take a look. So we have our older videos over here because they are still being used. They have been updated to reflect the videos that are in the actual modules. They just don't have the interactive elements, but you can easily get right to all the interactive tutorials right from the university website. And students don't have to log in or anything. They can go right in and start using these. But if professors want, they can take the link and share it with their students as well.
Let me just try one here. Anyone want to pick anything out here? I don't know. I'll just show you how this one is the one that has 3 videos, but it's a little normal, but it's set up pretty much the same way. This is the home page. It's got the Creative Commons. There are the 3 videos, choosing and searching databases. And there should be audio here, but the narrator reads off the objectives. And then this was one of the things we built after the usability testing. The navigation was, you just went into it, and there was no clear way of, what does all this mean? We're not Apple, we don't have the best icons that just is so self-explanatory, So this, again, is narration explaining that we have tabs above. You can navigate between the sections. Yeah, all right. Oh yeah, so yeah, right, good idea. Except now we have to, no, that's all right. Well, just go ahead. Oh, right, there you go. So there's the closed captioning, just so you see. So this is section 1, which is the, how do I find journal, the generic one. And again, it's the 3 minutes, that's one of the longer ones. 3 minutes, there's the try it, and then a quiz. Some of these are actually software simulations, so it's, click here, do this, do that. Choosing databases, again, a presentation. How do I choose the best database? And try it is one of these drag and drops. So let me see, Shakespeare sonnets would probably go in arts and humanities. Bridge design, New England, no. So at any rate, and oops, this is marketing, right? Well, anyway, you get the idea, so it'll stick. The searching databases, presentation about it, it's, again, a little redundant on this one, but this is build yourself an annotated bibliography. And I don't know why there's, that's a blank screen there.
It's Amanda.
Oh, it's her talking.
Yeah.
Right. So there is, so this is one of those bullet point replacements from the original videos, I guess, or something like that. So it's, this is one of the interactive ones. One of the widgets that did not work, I tried to put a live Google screen in that frame over there. There's another video or a module where you compare a Google search with an academic search complete search. But those widgets wouldn't work, so when you click on this, it actually opens up another page. So that was one of those compromises I wasn't crazy about, but I lived with it. But here you find an article, and then there's, let me see, the words you type in will actually show up here. So you're kind of building, what the parts of an annotated bibliography are there. So that's one of them. I don't know, any others, anyone?
Question.
Yes?
So just now for the quiz, so students were able to record all the students' responses, what they typed in?
Yeah, that's the problem with the quiz. There's no way to gather all that unless students give it back to you.
Okay.
And that's what I wanted to do, is have that built into our management system. So those grades will go right to a grade book. So the teacher will be able to see that. Yeah, either way, go ahead, yeah.
Along those lines, have you identified any ways of integrating the tutorial with quizzing in the learning management system?
That's what I want to do. Right.
We're having to.
Yeah, right. Well, right now, we use Sakai, so all of these, let me just show you some of these questions here. Oops, how did I return the quiz going there? That's no good. Why does it go there? Because there's something wrong. See, we didn't do everything here, but
Well, with the quiz, it's supposed to be continual with each section of the module completed. There will be 2 to 3, I believe, or 2 to 4 questions. So it's usually when you do the first section, the first part of the quiz will come up, and then you have a little bit, not necessarily of a break, but then you move on to the different topics, learn those skills, do the interactive element, and then there'll be the next section of the quiz. So that's why it says return to quiz in those places, because it's under the assumption you already started it in another
Right.
spot. So
Right.
once that's completed, and all the quizzes for each section of the module are completed, you'll get a graded sheet that tells you your percentages, how you did, and everything like that. And unfortunately, it's that page right now that's not communicating right with our course management system. So right now, the unfortunate workaround, I guess, is students can take a screenshot or a snippet of it as kind of their proof and send that to their instructor. But we're trying to make it so it talks to the management system without students having
yeah,
to.
we do, since we use Sakai, all of these questions are in a question pool, different question pools. And right now, some instructors have asked to have real quizzes, so I was able to package specifically those questions into a Sakai quiz and mail it to them. It's like an XML file, or it's QTI. There's some file that you send, and they open it up in their Sakai. They have to go through jump through a few hoops to set up a quiz. So we can actually do it, but again, it's several hoops we both have to jump through, you know.
Because what we're kind of thinking about, we're trying to remodel this plagiarism tutorial that all first-year students have to take.
Right.
So we're using Blackboard, so we're thinking about trying to have something more interactive, like an Adobe Captivate tutorial.
Right. Yep.
That's within a Blackboard course or organization that all the students are registered in.
Right, right.
And then at the end of it, like instead of having the quiz embedded into the tutorial, have the quiz be embedded into Blackboard,
Right.
so that we could then harvest those results.
Right.
Like the only problem with that is that then you can't jump around with the quizzes so much unless you know.
Right.
So.
Yeah, right. As you'll see, this is mounted on Sakai as to sakai.uri.edu. So I'm sure you could do the same thing with Blackboard, where it just gets mounted there.
Was this tutorial created all with Adobe Captivate?
Yes. And it has a pretty, well, you can drag in graphics, but it's got some good graphical features. And again, it's got those widgets, it's got a lot of interactive type things, software simulation, creating videos, and those new videos were basically revamped. Those short videos that are embedded in here are just straight up, replacing the originals. Another question? Yes.
We've had, let's see, RefWorks and Zotero and EasyBib available. Very few of the students use them because they start thinking about them, using them the night before the project.
Yeah, sure,
is due.
right.
Have you tried, I assume you have something like that available. Do you try incorporating that? Or you just have them make their annotated bibliography like a Word document kind of thing?
Right. We have RefWorks, but we don't do a lot of instruction with that, and we didn't build it in here so much. But we do show them the cite tools on the databases. At least they'll get a consistent citation style, but they won't build a bibliography like RefWorks will, or store all that stuff. That's something they'll have to do on their own.
I think we've reached the
Have we?
end of our time.
Oh yes, quarter of.
Do you want to have a concluding?
Well, concluding, thank you very much for coming.